Good morning, afternoon, everyone. Today, we're stepping into a conversation that's as raw as it is necessary. The idea that someone could intentionally harm us physically, emotionally, or spiritually is one of the hardest truths to confront. It shakes us to the core because it feels like an attack not just on our actions, but on our essence. But here's the thing: their intent does not define your worth. It doesn't diminish your resilience or your capacity to heal. And most importantly, it doesn't have the final word in your story. One of the hardest truths to confront when someone intentionally harms us is the temptation to turn inward and ask, what did I do to deserve this? This question, though natural, stems from a false belief that we somehow have control over the choices and actions of others. It reflects our need to make sense of the pain. But the truth is simple, and liberating their intent to harm you was never about you. It was about them. When someone deliberately causes pain, it often reveals more about their own unresolved issues, insecurities, or struggles than it does about the person they target. Their actions might be rooted in envy, fear, and need for power, or their inability to handle their own emotions. They project their pain outward, seeking to offload it onto others. This can leave you questioning your worth, wondering what you did wrong, or how you could have been better to prevent it. But here's the thing: you are not responsible for the way someone chose to treat you. Their actions were a choice, and that choice belongs to them alone. Recognizing intentional harm is not the same as accepting responsibility for it. These two ideas must be kept separate because confusing them keeps you trapped in shame and self-blame emotions that do not serve your healing. When you internalize someone else's harmful behavior, you create a cycle of self-doubt and guilt. You might replay the situation over and over in your mind, analyzing every moment to see where you could have done something differently. But no matter how much you examine the past, you cannot rewrite their decision to harm you. Accepting this truth allows you to step out of the role of self-blame and instead focus on reclaiming your power. A key part of this process is setting boundaries, not just with others, but with yourself. A boundary might look like refusing to entertain thoughts of "I wasn't enough" or "I deserve this." You might remind yourself that intentional harm is always a choice made by the other person, and their actions are not a reflection of your character. It's also important to understand that recognizing harm does not make you weak or overly sensitive. It makes you aware. Awareness is the first step toward healing because it helps you see the situation for what it is: someone else's act, not your fault. By separating their intent from your value, you reclaim the narrative. You recognize that while you cannot control what was done to you, you can control how you move forward. You can decide that their actions will not dictate how you see yourself or the life you're building. Healing begins when you say to yourself, "I see the harm they caused, but I refuse to own their choices. I am not to blame for their decision to hurt me." This shift in perspective is empowering, freeing, and the first step in regaining your peace. Remember this: you are not what happened to you. You are how you rise above it. Shame is one of the most insidious emotions we experience, and its power lies in its ability to isolate us. When someone intentionally harms us, shame whispers lies that make us question our worth, decisions, and even our right to seek support. It tells us, "This is your fault," or "You deserve this," and worse, "If people knew, they'd see you differently." These lies create a cage of silence, and in that silence, shame grows. Unlike guilt, which focuses on actions: "I did something bad," shame attacks your identity. "I am bad." It feeds on secrecy and hides in the shadows of what we fear others might think if they truly knew our pain. But here's the truth about shame: it cannot survive when exposed to light. Speaking your truth, even just to yourself, is like shining a spotlight into the corners where shame hides. The lies it tells cannot withstand the reality of your worth, your humanity, and your right to heal. When you carry shame in silence, you also carry the burden of the harm done to you. You might feel like you're protecting yourself by keeping quiet, but what you're really doing is protecting the actions of the person who hurt you. Silence gives them power, while speaking up reclaims it. Now, speaking your truth doesn't mean you have to stand on a stage or share your story with the world. It can start small. It might mean confiding in a trusted friend, a therapist, or even writing your thoughts in a journal. The act of putting words to your experience, no matter how private or public, disrupts the cycle of silence and begins to loosen shame's grip. One of shame's cruelest tricks is making us believe we are alone in our suffering. But when we open up, we often find that others have felt the same, experienced the same, or are willing to stand with us in solidarity. Connection is the antidote to shame because it reminds us that we are not alone and we are not defined by the harm done to us. It's also important to recognize that shame thrives on perfectionism. It tells us we have to have it all together, that we can't let anyone see our mess, our pain, or our struggles. But perfectionism is a facade, and it's exhausting. The more we try to hide, the more shame convinces us that we're unworthy of love and support. True strength lies not in perfection, but in vulnerability, in letting someone see your wounds and still choosing to believe in your worth. Here's the paradox: the very thing shame tells you to avoid connection, speaking out. Being seen is the very thing that heals. It's in the act of saying, "This happened to me and it hurt, but it doesn't define me," that you begin to reclaim your story. When shame no longer has the power to silence you, it loses its ability to control you. And in that moment, you realize that the lies shame tells about your value, your strength, and your capacity to heal were never true. So remember, this shame cannot live in the light. Every time you speak your truth, you weaken its hold. And as you do, you create space for self-compassion, connection, and the courage to move forward. You are not what happened to you. You are not the lie shame tells. You are enough, just as you are. Forgiveness is one of the most misunderstood concepts in healing. For many, it feels like an impossible ask. How can I forgive someone who intentionally harmed me? It's a fair question, and it stems from the belief that forgiveness is about the other person, about excusing their behavior, absolving them of their wrongdoing, or reconciling with them. But true forgiveness is none of these things. Forgiveness is not about them at all. It's about you. At its core, forgiveness is freedom. It's the act of releasing the hold that someone else's actions have on your heart and mind. When you forgive, you're not saying what they did was okay. You're saying, I will not let their actions define my life, consume my thoughts, or keep me trapped in pain. Holding on to anger, resentment, or bitterness can feel like a form of control, like you're holding the other person accountable by refusing to let go. But what it really does is keep you tethered to them. It's like drinking poison and expecting them to suffer. The longer you carry the weight of resentment, the more it drains your emotional energy, leaving less room for joy, peace, and growth. Forgiveness is a radical act of self-care. It's choosing to unburden yourself from the emotional chains that tie you to the harm done. It doesn't mean you have to forget what happened. It doesn't mean you have to trust the person again, let them back into your life, or pretend everything is fine. Forgiveness is about setting yourself free, not giving them a pass. One of the most liberating truths about forgiveness is that it's a process, not a one-time decision. It's not a switch you flip overnight. It's a journey of acknowledging your pain, processing your emotions, and slowly loosening the grip that the hurt has on you. Some days forgiveness will feel attainable. Other days it will feel impossible. Both are okay. What matters is that you keep moving toward it at your own pace. It's also important to understand that forgiveness does not require reconciliation. Forgiving someone does not mean you have to let them back into your life. In fact, in many cases, maintaining boundaries is a necessary part of the healing process. Forgiveness happens in your heart, not in your relationship with the person who hurt you. Think of forgiveness as a gift you give yourself. It's choosing to prioritize your peace over your pain. It's saying, I deserve to move forward even if they never apologize, change, or acknowledge what they did. This shift in perspective is incredibly empowering because it puts the focus back on you, on your healing, your growth, and your future. Some people fear that forgiving will diminish the gravity of what happened, as if letting go minimizes the harm or the responsibility of the other person. But the truth is, forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it reclaims your present and future. It allows you to hold your head high and say, what happened to me was wrong, but it does not define me. Forgiveness is one of the greatest acts of courage and strength you can undertake. It's not about being weak or submissive. It's about standing in your power and deciding that the person who hurt you doesn't get to dictate how you feel, who you are, or where you're going. So when you think about forgiveness, think of it as a doorway to freedom. You're not approving of their actions, excusing their choices, or forgetting the pain. You're simply choosing yourself over the weight of resentment. You're choosing to heal. You're choosing peace. And most importantly, you're choosing to move forward on your terms, in your time, and with your heart healing from harm, especially when it's intentional, is a journey that requires two essential tools: boundaries and self-compassion. These two practices are not just helpful, they're non-negotiable. They create the foundation for your recovery and the space you need to rebuild your sense of self. Without them, the path to healing can feel overwhelming and at times unattainable. Let's start with boundaries. Boundaries are not walls, they're bridges to self-respect. They define what is acceptable in your life and protect you from further harm. When someone has intentionally hurt you, setting boundaries can feel both empowering and terrifying. You might worry about pushing people away, being seen as selfish, or disrupting relationships, but boundaries are not about others, they're about you, about protecting your peace, energy, and emotional well-being. Boundaries can take many forms. Sometimes they mean physical distance, choosing not to be in the same space as someone who has harmed you. Other times there are emotional limits, like refusing to engage in conversations that reopen old wounds or saying no to people who drain your energy. Boundaries can also be internal, such as deciding not to let harmful self-talk spiral out of control. The beauty of boundaries is that they're deeply personal. They're not one size fits all, and they don't require anyone else's approval. Setting boundaries is an act of self-love. It's a way of saying, I matter enough to protect myself. And the more you practice setting and maintaining them, the more you'll realize that they're not a sign of weakness or defensiveness, they're a sign of strength. However, setting boundaries is only half the equation. The other half is self-compassion. Self-compassion is the practice of treating yourself with the same kindness, understanding, and care that you would offer a dear friend. When you've been hurt, it's easy to turn inward with blame or harsh criticism. You might replay events thinking, I should have seen it coming, or why wasn't I stronger? These thoughts only deepen the wounds. Self-compassion is the antidote to this self. To practice self-compassion, you must first acknowledge your pain. This might sound simple, but it can be one of the hardest steps. Many of us are conditioned to downplay our suffering or brush it aside. We tell ourselves, it's not that bad, or I should be over this by now, but healing requires honesty. It requires saying, this hurt me, and that's valid. Next, self-compassion asks us to offer ourselves understanding. This is where the inner critic often shows up, trying to convince you that you're somehow at fault or unworthy of care. When this happens, imagine how you would respond to a loved one who is hurting. You wouldn't dismiss their feelings or criticize their reactions. You would listen, comfort, and remind them of their strength. Offer yourself the same grace. Finally, self-compassion involves giving yourself permission to heal at your own pace. Healing is not linear. Some days you'll feel strong and hopeful, while others might bring back the pain or doubt. This is normal. Self-compassion means accepting where you are in the moment and knowing that it's enough. When you combine boundaries with self-compassion, you create a powerful dynamic. Boundaries give you the external protection you need to feel safe, while self-compassion nurtures your internal world, allowing you to process and heal. Together, they create a space where you can grow, rebuild, and rediscover your strength. Healing is not about returning to who you were before the harm. It's about becoming someone new, someone who carries their scars not as marks of defeat, but as evidence of survival and resilience. Boundaries and self-compassion are the tools that make this transformation possible. They remind you that you are worthy of protection, care, and love both from others and from yourself. So as you navigate your healing journey, remember this: boundaries are your shield and self-compassion is your balm. Together, they empower you to not just survive, but thrive. There's a powerful myth in our society that wholeness means perfection, that to be whole. We must be free of flaws, scars, or damage. But the truth is, wholeness isn't about being untouched by pain. It's about embracing all the parts of yourself, both the hurt and the healed, and finding strength in the journey. When someone intentionally hurts us, it can feel like they've broken something deep within us. We might feel shattered, fragmented, or incomplete. These feelings are valid. Pain has a way of making us question everything: our worth, our identity, and even our future. But damage doesn't mean destruction. Just because you've been hurt doesn't mean you're beyond repair. You can carry wounds and still be whole. You can have scars and still be beautiful. In fact, it's often the most broken parts of us that, when healed, become the strongest. Think about how bones that have been broken heal back stronger at the point of the fracture. The same is true for our emotional and spiritual selves. One of the first steps to recognizing your wholeness is understanding that healing doesn't mean erasing the past. You can't undo what happened, but you can choose how it shapes you. Your experiences, even the painful ones, are part of your story, but they don't define your identity. You are more than the harm you've endured. In many cultures, there's a practice of repairing broken pottery with gold, a process called kintsugi. The philosophy behind this art is that the cracks and flaws are not something to be hidden. They are something to be highlighted and celebrated. The object becomes more valuable not despite its damage, but because of it. This is a beautiful metaphor for the human spirit. Your scars are not signs of weakness. They are proof of your resilience, a testament to the fact that you have faced difficulty and survived. To embrace your wholeness, even when you feel damaged, requires a shift in perspective. It's about seeing yourself not as broken, but as a work in progress. Healing is not about returning to who you were before the harm. It's about becoming someone new, someone stronger, more empathetic, and more self-aware. This doesn't mean you have to be grateful for the harm or see it as a gift. It's okay to acknowledge the pain and the injustice of what happened. But alongside that acknowledgement, you can also recognize your capacity to grow through the experience. Pain, while deeply unfair, often teaches us lessons we couldn't have learned otherwise: the importance of boundaries, the strength of our resilience, the value of self-compassion. Wholeness is also about integration, bringing all the parts of yourself together, even the ones you wish weren't there. It's about saying, yes, this happened to me, and it hurt. But it's part of my story, and I'm still standing. You don't have to deny your damage to affirm your worth. In fact, your ability to face your pain and continue moving forward is a testament to your wholeness. Lastly, wholeness is not a destination, it's a journey. There will be days when you feel strong and invincible, and days when the weight of what happened feels overwhelming. Both are part of the process. Being whole doesn't mean you're never triggered, never sad, or never vulnerable. It means that even on your hardest days, you know deep down that you are enough. You are not defined by your damage. You are defined by your ability to keep going, to find beauty in the midst of brokenness, and to hold on to hope even when it feels out of reach. You are living proof that you can be damaged and still be whole. So the next time you feel like your scars make you less worthy, remember the scars are symbols of survival, not shame. You are a mosaic of all your experiences, the good, the bad, and the beautiful. And even in the face of damage, you are and always have been whole. You said it's easy to believe that damage makes us less, that the harm we endure leaves us broken, incomplete, or unworthy of happiness and love. The idea that we can be damaged and still be whole may feel contradictory, but it's one of the most profound truths of healing. Wholeness doesn't mean being untouched by pain or free of scars. It means embracing every part of your journey, the wounds, the lessons, and the growth, and recognizing that they all contribute to who you are. When harm happens, especially intentional harm, it often leaves behind a trail of questions. What's wrong with me? Why did this happen to me? Or will I ever feel normal again? These thoughts can make you feel like a puzzle with missing pieces, as if the damage has taken away something essential. But the reality is, the essence of who you are, your worth, your humanity, your resilience remains intact, no matter what you've been through. Healing begins when we stop seeing ourselves as broken and start seeing ourselves as evolving. Life, by its very nature, includes pain. And while we don't get to choose the harm that comes our way, we do get to choose how we respond to it. That choice is where our wholeness lies. Imagine a piece of pottery that's been cracked. In Japanese culture, there's an art form called kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired using gold. Instead of trying to hide the cracks, they're highlighted, becoming part of the object's beauty. The repaired pottery is not just as good as it was before, it's even more valuable. This philosophy can be applied to our own lives. Our scars and wounds don't diminish us, they enhance us, making us stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. Being whole while carrying damage requires a shift in perspective. It's about acknowledging that your experiences, even the painful ones, are part of your story but do not define your worth. Damage is an event, it's something that happened to you, not something you are. When you realize this, you can begin to integrate your pain into the larger narrative of your life, finding meaning and growth even in the hardest moments. Wholeness is not about perfection or the absence of struggle. It's about authenticity, about being honest with yourself and others about where you've been and who you are. It's about showing up for your life even when it's messy and choosing to keep moving forward. Wholeness is not about denying your pain. It's about embracing it as part of what makes you human. Practically speaking, embracing your wholeness might look like giving yourself permission to feel your emotions without judgment. It's okay to grieve, to be angry, or to feel lost. These feelings are not signs of weakness, they're signs that you're processing your experience and moving toward healing. It also involves self-compassion. You wouldn't look at someone else who has been hurt and think they're any less worthy of love or joy because of it. So why would you think that about yourself? Being whole means offering yourself the same kindness and grace that you'd extend to someone you care about. Another key to embracing your wholeness is learning to rewrite the narrative of your pain. Instead of seeing it as something that broke you, you can begin to see it as something that shaped you. This doesn't mean you have to be grateful for what happened. It's okay to wish it hadn't. But it does mean recognizing that you have the power to grow from it. Wholeness also involves recognizing that healing is a journey, not a destination. There will be days when you feel strong and resilient and days when the pain resurfaces and feels overwhelming. Both are part of the process. Wholeness doesn't mean you're never triggered or never sad again. It means that even in those moments, you know you are still enough, still deserving of love, and still moving forward. It's important to let go of the idea that being damaged is something to be ashamed of. Everyone carries their own wounds. They're part of the shared human experience. What matters is not the presence of damage, but what you choose to do with it. Will you let it hold you back, or will you let it be the foundation for your growth? Remember this, your scars are proof of your survival. They are reminders of the strength it took to endure and the courage it takes to heal. You are not defined by what happened to you, but by how you rise above it. Being damaged and being whole are not mutually exclusive. You can hold your pain and your hope at the same time. You can carry your scars and still be beautiful, capable, and worthy. You are not broken. You are a masterpiece in progress. And even in the face of damage, you are and always have been whole.